Disclaimer, I guess. A few things I mentioned were written during the Freestyle Riders event before the Hilltop race, so keep that in mind if I bring up something that feels like something they're already doing in a way. Sonic Speed Simulator, Sega's latest online Sonic endeavor. And probably their best considering their track record. It's a Roblox Sonic game where you have to collect crystals to increase your speed and power while unlocking new characters and chow by throwing your precious time out the window by doing things like collecting 25,000 birthday presents. Cool. Speed Simulator in its current state is a perfectly serviceable time waster to play when you have nothing else going on. You run around and increase your speed level. However, I feel like this game can be so much more. The idea of a big Sonic multiplayer game is genius and has so much potential behind it. Just take a look at what fans have done with games like Sonic Roboblast 2, Sonic Revert, Sonic Network World. That's a tongue twister and a half. These projects only scratch the surface of what a multiplayer Sonic game can be, and I feel that Speed Simulator could easily be the perfect Sonic game to play with your friends if Sega and the game's developers GameFam Studios changed certain things enough to add to its quality and replayability, making players want to return to the game even when there isn't much new going on. So, here are my 2 cents on how I would make the ideal Sonic Speed Simulator. Before we start, I want to burn into your skull the fact that I'm not a Roblox guy. The only reason I still have a Roblox account to begin with is to play this game, and for, iconic games like Minion and Nuke. I'm aware that there are many limitations with developing a game on Roblox, and some things may cause players on weaker hardware to experience slowdown or crashes, or even risk the game to stop working, period. I tried to keep the fact that this is a Roblox game in mind, but I also tried to push the limits of what it could do, if that makes any sense. I've seen some wild stuff related to Sonic on this platform. Heck, I didn't even think something like Speed Simulator was even possible on Roblox until I saw it through. Anyway, now that that's embedded into your brain, let's take a look at what I would say would be the ideal Sonic Speed Simulator. In my ideal Sonic Speed Simulator, we would first increase the game's player limit from 16. I feel that limiting lobbies like this can kind of defeat the point of these massive worlds that you traverse. You have these huge worlds that Sonic can roll around in with these really interesting design tropes, and yet you limit that to only 16 people, a number which can only fill up to 1 zone. This could also lead to problems for content creators who want to have their viewers join games and live streams. Increasing it to something like 30 or 50 would allow each zone to feel more alive and not have players just crowd around Green Hill. Of course, races will have limits placed on them for how many people can join, but we'll get to that later. You'd start the game on the title screen that we all know and love, but something would be different. I suggest that rather than having Green Hill be cluttered with all this junk about events, leaderboards, and UGC items with many awkward pathways to random events, we should have an entire mini-zone that takes the form of a lobby for these things. I'm thinking of something that would look similar to the Arc lobbies from Phantasy Star Online 2, and you could even place the Freestyle Riders Tower here and have Jet and Knuckles standing there with their challenges since they kind of look similar in a way. We can maybe have big floating monitors scattered around the zone like in PSO2 that promote upcoming Sonic projects like the billboards of the current Speed Sim and the available racetracks, or maybe they could show the results of previous racetracks, encouraging you to beat the players ahead of you. Sorry, spitballing here. This place would mainly serve as a hub for the weekly updates, leaderboards, UGC items, portals to each zone, as well as be the place to find permanent updates such as Metal Madness, silly goose. Metal Madness, Green Reef, and the Rouge the Bat update. This will also be the place for certain other things that I'll get into later. Entering the Green Hill portal, you'll see that this is far less cluttered at spawn. You'll still have the few things like the Tornado missions, the obbies, and the Mechanic Tails missions, since I feel those fit the area. Some of the new things you'll notice are the new badniks around the area. These will most likely be your mainstays, like Moto Bugs, Egg Pawns, Buzz Bombers, stuff like that. Rather than having them deplete your rings when you get hit, since they're used as a form of currency now, maybe we could implement a health system that, when you get too many hits in rapid succession, you'll be sent back to the spawn point of the zone. Or, we could implement a ring banking feature. In the new lobby, there could be a bank that'll allow you to store rings for safekeeping that you could easily deposit or withdraw. This could allow you to drop rings when being hit by badniks like in previous games without having you lose a big chunk of rings that you've saved up. But maybe have the rings work like in Sonic Unleashed, where you'd only lose a good amount of rings rather than all of them at once. Both of these possibilities can encourage you to actually think about where you're going and how you can keep up your speed when defeating enemies. Because now, badniks will give you rings and XP upon defeat to incentivize you to defeat as many as you can. It won't be much XP or a lot of rings until you level up high enough. Maybe at around 2 rebirth, they'll give you XP to increase a level. Another thing that you may notice is that scavenger hunts are completely overhauled, no longer polluting the worlds with nothing but chili dogs. Now, you have multiple ways of completing events, somewhat like how Sonic Frontiers is allowing you to complete that game in a multitude of ways. Maybe you could select if you want to defeat a certain amount of badniks, run at a certain speed or higher for a certain amount of time, or if you actually enjoy the scavenger hunts like a sociopath, they could be one of the optional ways to do it. And you could pollute the world with chili dogs. Most of the terrain for each zone will remain the same. I think that most of these stages are so well designed, especially stuff like Chemical Plant, Hilltop. Oh dude, Hilltop is so freaking good. Speaking of well-designed stages, there will be more obbies added in each zone. GameFam is seemingly already working on this as they've recently added an obby to Emerald Hill Zone. But just to jam into your skull, I feel that every zone should have at the very least one of these obbies. Green Hill's obbies are perfectly fine as they are. They're simple tutorial stages to get newer players familiar with the controls. But as you go on, they should get harder and harder in difficulty and longer in length. They should be easy in Lost Valley, average in Green Hill and Snow Valley, and difficult in Hilltop and Chemical Plant. Those last two obbies should also be optimized so that higher level players can still have at least a little bit of challenge. And in the new lobby, there should be 2 leaderboards showing the players with the fastest time in each obby to allow for competition. One for global players and one for people in the server you're in. Next up, I want to change how races are done a bit. GameFam is already adding longer maps than just single straight lines, as seen in the newly added Hilltop Zone and Green Hill tracks. But when we get to a point where maybe we have like 7 or 6 of these tracks, they should add somewhat of a queuing system. In the lobby, there'd be a section specifically for races. When entering, a menu will pop up with 2 options: standard on-foot racing or hoverboard racing. GameFam has shown that this game can work well with hoverboard exclusive races with the new Metal City update, so having an entire mode dedicated to that would be very interesting to see. When selecting one of the options, you're added to a queue. This group of people in your queue are the people that you'll be racing against in the upcoming race. If it's a track that you're not too fond of, you can opt out of the queue within 60 seconds after the previous race ended. Each race is limited to a maximum of 16 players, and if the queue were to ever reach the maximum number of players, the race will start right away. When the race finishes, you're asked if you want to go back into the queue. This will allow you to grind races for if you're ever just in the mood, or if a weekly update requests it as one of the optional competition routes. When a race is fully concluded, the top 3 racers will be displayed on one of the big monitors I talked about earlier. Now, I want to go over a few smaller changes that I'd make that don't warrant an entire section, but are a few things that I would really want to see changed. The main menu that has all the characters, chow, trails, and stuff would receive a very slight update for controller users. Just something as simple as the D-pad and bumpers being used for easier navigation while still allowing for mouse emulation would be pretty nice. I'd add a few poses, or emotes if you will, for the players that just want to roleplay with friends. For example, I'd add a sitting pose to allow the characters to sit on a chaise at the beach in Green Hill. These poses would cost a certain amount of rings in the same capsule that holds the trails and chow, or they'd also be earned through rewards and weekly events. And finally, I'd add some kind of default mount mechanic where you can set one of the hoverboards or tornadoes as a default mount, making it easier to instantly whip it out in races without having to select one before you get into the queue. With that, I have changed up Sonic Speed Simulator in a way that I would see as ideal. If you have any other ideas or think I'm a freaking maniac for these takes, be sure to leave a kind message to me in a formal manner. Sonic Speed Simulator as of now is already a really fun way to spend time and screw around as Sonic characters, and I just wanted to see how I could possibly make the experience even more interesting. Let's just hope and pray that this game doesn't end up like its older brother Team Sonic Racing, because oh my gosh, there is still nobody here. Maybe if I wait a while, the game will fill up and I can have a fun time in Seaside Hill for the 18th time.